Hi and welcome to this chess video. I am FIDE Master Ingvar Johannesson from Iceland, and I'm going to show you a game from the Alphazero versus Stockfish match. Now, it was about a year ago in December 2017 that I started seriously making chess videos again, trying to get more volume in, and one of the main culprits for that was Alphazero. They published these 10 games from the, I think, 100 game match in 2017. Very fascinating games. But then we didn't hear much from or about Alphazero. But now recently they published an article in the Science magazine, a paper, and they actually addressed some situations from the first 100 game match. They played another game, another match, 1,000 games actually, under various conditions. Some used doubling books, some didn't. But in general, the settings for Stockfish were much better. They used 44 threads, 44 cores, 32 gigabyte hash table or hash, whatever you call it. I will leave a link to the paper, the description, where you can learn about the match conditions if you're interested in that. But many fascinating games, and I think for the rest of this month, most of my content will be games from this very fascinating match. So let's dive into the first game that I'm going to look at from this new batch of games. 210 games have been published, and let's have a look. So this first game that we're going to look at, Alphazero has the white pieces. And I thought this game was very fascinating with many interesting and unusual themes, but very instructive. It's always, these games are so fascinating. But okay, let's get on with it. Alphazero with white. It plays knight to f3. Now it seems to prefer d4 openings. Sometimes it's playing, well, okay, let's have a look at these arrows. It's playing d4, sometimes c4, this game knight to f3. Very quickly we transpose to the English after c4, knight to f6, knight c3, and bishop to b4. Sort of an Imso-Indian type of way to play against the English. And Alphazero goes queen c2. It wants to capture on c3 with a queen. After castles we have a3. Immediately questioning the bishop, and by far the most common move is to take here. If you go back, you've kind of lost some time, so black usually takes here. So black has castled, has a nice lead, well, a small lead in development, and despite losing the bishop pair, these positions are usually considered to be quite solid for black. He will sometimes go for e5, sometimes we go b6, a5. Put our pawns on black squares to the bishop that we got rid of. Alphazero goes for the space on the queen side, plays b4, and normal move by Stockfish, e5, and bishop to b2. So having given up the bishop pair, white is gaining a very strong black squared bishop, and already we have a battery set up on this diagonal, and in some amateur games you will see this battery immediately fulfilling the requirements of mate, usually with black blundering something, but machines don't blunder, so we'll have to see some more advanced play from Alphazero, but already contours of a nice battery on this diagonal. e3 was played, so this bishop is going to be developed to e2 instead of fianchettoing, which is also sometimes an option, but this seems like a quicker way to play e3 and bishop e2. Rook e8 and d3, not allowing e4, although if you go e4 in some cases, of course you're opening up for this battery. if I can get anything right. But you get the idea. So d3, preventing e4. And now knight to f8. Seems like Stockfish wants to have this knight around for the defense of the king. Sometimes we can jump to g6. At the moment we're protecting this, but most importantly we're just opening up for the bishop to develop. Bishop e2. Another move, a5. A move that is quite often played in these structures. We already mentioned that, okay, b6 is something that black is quite happy with. It tones well with the bishop. You have the pawns on black squares and the bishop on light squares. That, you know, increases the scope, and also you dominate or control more squares. White usually doesn't want to go b5. It's not a bad move, but it does give black some options of maybe swinging this knight over quickly to c5. And the same thing goes for b takes a5. This pawn will be quickly regained, and the knight will have a very nice square here on c5. Also taking weakens the a pawn, the a file, and the square a4. So white for the moment decides to keep the tension, castles, and now bishop g4 by Stockfish, getting some pieces out. We have h3 questioning the bishop, and of course black isn't easily going to give up the bishop pair here. Taking on f3, this would give white a tremendous bishop on f3, bearing down on this diagonal, and yeah, the pair of bishops would just be beautiful. So keeping the bishop, bishop to h5, and now queen c2. It looked like the queen was nicely set up on c3, but at the moment, you know, this diagonal isn't opening up right away, and it turns out that in some lines it's better to actually have the queen on c2. For instance, in case of a move like e4, you already have a nice battery set up with bishop to d3, even allowing this, and here the queen stands well, cooperating with the bishop. h6 now by Stockfish. It's a move, not sure what it does really. Maybe white had some ideas of knight g5, I doubt it though. But okay, h6 doesn't really hurt the position, creates luft, but it's just a move. Bishop c3. Now I can think about taking on a5, because now it's protected by the bishop, and if we do that, we can actually put pressure on the b pawn. So black prefers to protect the a pawn with b6. And now b5 by Alphazero. Seems like in most cases you would like to keep the flexibility of these pawns, just keep them on the 4th rank, because once you go b5 like Alphazero did, you are surrendering the c5 square, which we can access via d7 or e6. Stockfish actually goes with the other knight, knight 6 to d7. After rook a to d1, it plays knight to c5. So a nice square for the knight, but Alphazero's idea seems to be to play at some point d4, trying to open up for this unopposed bishop. It first starts with tucking the bishop away, bishop to a1. So the bishop sort of did its job, put pressure on b6, on a5, forced b6, and now it plays b5. So now the bishop tucks back, and we're ready to, at some stage, put the queen back on the diagonal for the battery if we need. For now, bishop to g6 by Stockfish. Black's position is quite solid, and you know, while looking at this game for the first time, it wasn't clear how white, you know, immediately makes progress. But now we see queen to b2. This seems to be a little bit of a trick, because Stockfish now plays knight to a4, attacking the queen. But while this is not a blunder, it was the second choice of my Stockfish 10, which I downloaded recently. But the problem with the move is that after queen a2, the knight is kind of stuck, because now if you play d4, we can think about taking. I can think about taking back with a pawn, and now my pawn on d4 is actually controlling the c5 square. So your knight is stuck, and with the pawn on d4, I just need to attack it with my queen, and I could win the knight. So the knight has to go back, and this means that we got actually a free move, queen to a2 and now d4. So if we go back to the position where we played queen b2, it looks like we just played queen a2 in one move and then d4. So very nice and instructive maneuver here, which gives Alphazero a free move in a way. Okay, Stockfish takes on d4, and now knight takes d4. Very solid and nice position for white. We have managed to open up for the bishop. We're hoping for big things on this diagonal, and yeah, the knight could jump into c6, which Stockfish didn't want to allow, so it played bishop to e4. And now Alphazero goes for the trade, bishop to f3. It wants to trade light squared bishops. Why? Well, just to get good squares on the light squares. Weaken the light square complex. Usually when you have the bishop pair, you try to hold on to it, but here Alphazero has a very concrete way or a reason that it wants to trade the bishops. After bishop takes f3, well, otherwise we just take on e4. Here another surprising move. The knight is already well placed. It wants to go to c6. So yeah, the natural move seems to be knight takes f3, but Alphazero damages its structure. It takes with the pawn g2, takes on f3, and now we have double pawns and an isolated pawn here, and we weakened the king's shelter. However, Alphazero of course realizes that this gives white tremendous dynamic chances to use the g file for an attack, move the king, place the rook on the g file, and bear down on the g7 point where you are cooperating with a bishop. Also, this pawn on f3 is covering some key squares on e4, which limits this knight. For now, we see knight f to e6 from Stockfish and king to h2. If you go knight c6, you have to be slightly careful because, well, we did weaken our structure and have to move like queen to h4. Seems like we're already in trouble with the pawn on h3. So despite having this juicy outpost, we don't really have time to take advantage of it. So first, Alphazero has to go king to h2 here. This allows black to trade off the dangerous knight, which would otherwise go to c6, or in some cases f5. So knight takes d4. And here again, yeah, bishop takes d4 looks like the natural move, but Alphazero, it's very good at activating its rooks in unusual ways. Rook takes d4. So now the rook it has some options. One of them includes just swinging over to the king side to g4, lining up with the other rook with a battery on the g file. And now we have king h7 by Stockfish. Queen c2 check, g6, and now rook to f4. You know, it seems like black weakens his positions a bit with the king to h7, but this you know, battery on the g file is simply coming, so you can't really play a move like, let's say you play f6. I will just swing my stuff over, probably this one, and now you just have a target. You know, you have to protect this. You can't play rook e7. I mean, if I get my rook to g1, you can't play rook e7 because bishop takes f6. This just seems like a lot of weaknesses. The queen can swing over, queen here to queen here. So, not great options for Stockfish, so it went for this setup here. Now rook to f4, attacking the pawn on f7, queen to e7, and rook to g1. So all the white pieces are all of a sudden active on the king side. This nice diagonal, the queen on this diagonal, and now we have the rooks as well here. This one on the f file and this one on the g file. Okay, well placed pieces, but we need to increase the pressure, and Alphazero does so with pawn to h4. So it wants to play h5, open up lines, but taking on g6. So Alphazero plays, Stockfish plays h5, And now rook to a g5. Now, I will leave it to you to figure out the threat here. If black were to play a move like knight to e6, attacking both rooks, white has a very nice move here. Puzzle rush, puzzle rush. Rook takes h5, which is actually checkmate, utilizing the pin on the pawn here, so the rook can't be taken. This leaves Stockfish with, yeah, not a very good option, king to h6. Okay, this does protect the pawn, unpin the g-pawn. But now, yeah, an interesting moment. Seems like white can play on with a move like bishop to f6 and just go from there. But Alphazero plays e4. And the interesting thing about this move is that it allows black to play knight to e6, winning the exchange. That's precisely what happens after rook to e6, rook to f6, knight takes g5, and h takes g5. And another quick puzzle for you, can we take on g5? Puzzle rush, you gotta be quick, you gotta be queen to c1 or d2. King has to go to h4, queen f4, mate. So of course the pawn can't be taken. Stockfish goes back to h7. And now f4. And just look at this domination. This is so typical for Alphazero. It's down the exchange, full exchange. 7 pawns each. But the domination across the board, it's just beautiful. b5. This is dominating the structure here. This is going nowhere, this is blocked, and this really can't move. Same thing on the other side, g5 pawn. And the other pawns can't move. The rook on f6, pinning the queen down, has to protect the f7 pawn. And this beautiful bishop on the long diagonal, just lurking here, waiting for its chance. Rook a to e8. And one thing to notice here is that the black rooks, he's up the exchange, but the rooks, they can't do anything. I mean, where's this guy going? There are no open files for the rooks. Okay, you play rook a to e8, you attack the e4 pawn, but you can't even take it, because my rook is attacking f7. Queen d3. And of course, yeah, if queen takes e4, I just take on f7. And you have to interpose the rook. And you just lost. So what else? Yeah, Stockfish played rook g7, protecting the pawn. Just to illustrate the problems that black is facing. If rook f8, which looks like a natural move because, well, rook g7, you don't want to fianchetto your rook, right? There's only one position where you can and should fianchetto your rook. It's an endgame outside of the scope of this video, but this looks more natural. But now simply queen to d1. And to illustrate the threat, I will leave it to you. What is white's threat here? Puzzle rush. Puzzle rush, baby! So if this was a puzzle, you would immediately find the winning move for white, which is BAM! Queen takes h5. If you take it, puzzle rush, Czechoslovakia, and checkmate. Take it. If you don't take it, another puzzle rush type of mate. King g8, queen f6, and queen back to g7. Of course, Stockfish sees and realizes this, and that's why it played rook to g7. When you have less trouble on the diagonal, because at least the rook is now blocking any queen sacrifice from happening. But now, okay, this meant since black protected this pawn, we have to protect our e4 pawn, king to g8. And white is just dominating down the exchange, but look at this rook, it's just horrible. Queen d4, lining up on the diagonal, king to f8. The only downside to white's position and its domination is that you can't move the rook really at the moment. So you have to build up, eventually bring your pawns. But it's beautiful how Alphazero just uses all the pieces. First, it's never in a rush, it just improves the pieces. Bishop c3. Why? Well, okay, on a1, previously we went to a1 and we stayed there for a long time, just lurking, waiting for things to happen on this diagonal. But now it thinks, okay, we more or less accomplished opening this diagonal. So now let's just place the bishop on a square where it has slightly more scope. Who knows, if we open up the position, like play f5 at some stage, maybe the bishop could be swung over here and here, or go to e1 and h4. If black plays a4, maybe you play bishop to b4. It just has more options on c3 than a1. Okay, rook g8, a4. Maybe not a necessary move, but when the position opens up, and in the game it will, maybe in some cases you don't want, let's say, a black rook arriving on d3 and hitting 2 pawns. So once we move the pawn to a4, we actually prevent that. Rook d8, and here king h3. In the first match we saw some beautiful games, especially even in the opening, where Stockfish, well actually Alphazero, just brought its king to e3 in a French, protecting the center of the board, the center pawns, maintaining the space advantage. And here it shows similar disregard. King comes to h3, and there's no way for black. The rooks can't come in, and bringing the queen around the board is impossible and illegal. So the king is quite safe on h3. Stockfish can't really do much. It's just waiting rook d7. Solid position. Actually, after king h3, it's evaluating almost every move for black as plus 1.27 for white. What that means that it sort of doesn't find a way forward for white. It just says, okay, any move I make, I have a slight disadvantage, but I don't see any difference, and it doesn't see a way for white to improve. But Alphazero very quickly improves, actually. Plays f5. And here you have to take, okay, let's see some moves like queen to e8. You're just going to get puzzle rushed. Takes, you can't take. If you take, then queen h8, and a nice mate here. You can't really block the diagonal. I would just take, and the main factor here is that yeah, this rook is just out of play. Here, a line which illustrates what I was talking about earlier with the rook coming into d3, not attacking 2 pawns. So Alphazero seems to always have, well, of course, ideas behind the moves, some deep ideas. So okay, after f5, black doesn't really have a choice. Takes on f5, and rook takes f5. So now we've managed to increase the scope of the rook. We have queen to e6, pinning the rook. So what does Alphazero do? Combining attack and defense. Once again, beautifully, king to h4. And the king is actually quite safe here. There's no way to give a jack back here anywhere. The queen isn't coming in, the rooks aren't coming in. So we're just unpinning the rook. Rook e7. And now offering the endgame, actually. Stockfish doesn't want that, plays rook to g6. But just a quick demo, if you take c takes d5. And the problem here is, yeah, black just doesn't have any scope for his pieces. We saw this in the first match a year ago. But now, it seems Alphazero might even be stronger here. More of the same, just dominating, making the opponent's pieces just horrible. And a position like this, I think even I would win here against the computer. Seems quite easy. You just bring the rook around, let's say to h4, and to h7. Black can't contest the h file. You can bring the king back here to f5, and then just start pushing the pawns, f4, e5. And black just doesn't have anything. This is just game over. So Stockfish doesn't want the ending, goes rook g6. And now to add insult to injury, with all these heavy pieces fairly close to the white king, Alphazero just plays king takes h5. Like, come on, what's he gonna do? Absolutely nothing. Rook e8, Stockfish can only wait. Bishop f6. Beautiful domination, queen d7. King to g4. Rook c8, and now queen c6. Once again, offering an endgame. Stockfish goes queen e8. If it takes, B takes c6, and once again the pieces just can't move. And what this actually does is that the king is not completely boxed in, it's not going anywhere, and we're again going with this plan of just swinging the rook to the h file, and we're just going to win. You can't even break here. The d5 break, we have 2 pawns covering it. Same with the b5 break, 2 pawns covering it. It's not happening. So after queen c6, we have queen to e8. And now the end is near. Alphazero now goes for the ending. Queen takes e8. King takes e8 and rook to d5. Preparing in some cases just to swing the rook over. Here or here, depending on circumstances. And it kind of shows how bad the position is that Stockfish went with rook takes f6 here, just giving up the exchange. Just to demonstrate, if you try to activate this rook, which seems like the only way to play, we play e5. And yeah, what are you going to do? We also have f5, f4, f5 coming in. Okay, let's say we go here. We just play f4, d takes e5, rook takes e5, king f8. Why is it just dominating the whole board? There's nothing happening here. So Stockfish took on f6, and here I thought maybe Stockfish would activate the rook. He played c6 here, but here I thought, okay, you must activate the rook, but this actually doesn't change a thing. White will simply advance the pawn to f4, and despite only being up 1 pawn, it's so far advanced that black can't do anything. Let's see a sample line. Let's see black going for the counterplay, going for the 8 pawn. We just calmly swing the rook over, giving up 2 pawns in the process, but we're going to win the f7 pawn eventually through a forced sequence. And okay, take or not to take on e5, let's just take and push our pawn, but it turns out that these 2 pawns here are too strong. Once we come to e6 with this pawn, we're introducing some mating ideas because the pawns are covering everything on the 7th rank. So move like king d8, I play e6, already threatening mate, so that just looks like a wasted move. So let's say king c8, but now rook f8, and you have to go to b7, and white is queening. So yeah, another desperation move here, c6. Alphazero simply took, and now f4. After rook h8, e5, we had resignation. If white does nothing, we're just simply and eventually crashing through. We're going to win this pawn, and the f pawn will decide the game. So a very, very impressive game from Alphazero. One of the games that I looked at and just enjoyed tremendously, and I'll be coming at you with more games from this fascinating match, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.